Red dust, old oil, and unpaid bills had become the shape of Marcus Freeman's life. By late afternoon, the desert town of Red Mesa, Arizona, looked like it had been left too long in the sun. The paint on the storefronts had peeled. The motel sign near the old highway flickered even in daylight. The gas station across the road had been closed for 6 years, its pumps wrapped in chains, its windows clouded with sand. At the far edge of town, where the cracked blacktop gave way to open desert, stood a small garage with a faded sign above the bay doors. Freeman Motor Works. The letters had once been bright blue. Marcus's father had helped him paint them 20 years earlier, standing on a ladder in the morning heat, smiling like the whole world was finally opening its doors. Now the sign was sun-bleached, chipped, and hanging a little crooked. Inside the garage, Marcus Mac Freeman lay on his back beneath an old Ford pickup, one arm reaching deep into the engine bay, his fingers locked around a bolt that did not want to move. He was 44 years old, broad-shouldered, dark-skinned, and worn down in the way only a working man can be worn down. Not broken, not soft, just tired in the bones. Sweat ran from his shaved head down the side of his face. It slipped into his eyes, mixed with grease, and stung like salt. "Come on," he muttered, teeth clenched. "Don't make me beg." The wrench slipped. His knuckles slammed into the frame. Marcus sucked in a sharp breath, closed his eyes, and let the pain pass through him. Then he opened them again and kept working. That was what Marcus did. He kept working. Even when there were no customers waiting. Even when the phone did not ring. Even when the bank called twice a day. Even when the sheriff's cruiser slowed down outside his shop for no good reason. On the front office door, taped at eye level, was a notice printed on clean white paper. It looked almost polite. That was the cruel part. The notice said Marcus had 72 hours to pay $6,200 in past due payments, penalties, and legal fees. If he failed, the bank would begin final foreclosure proceedings on Freeman Motor Works. The garage, the tools, the lifts, the old cot in the back room where Marcus had been sleeping since the divorce. All of it would be gone. Marcus had read the notice so many times that the words had burned themselves into his mind. He did not need to look at it anymore. He could feel it. It sat on his chest, like a cinder block. He finally freed the stubborn bolt, rolled out from under the pickup, and sat up slowly. His knees cracked. His back ached. His hands were black with oil, except where fresh blood showed along his knuckles. The shop was quiet, too quiet. Years ago, Freeman Motor Works had been busy from sunrise to dark. Farmers brought in trucks, families came in with vans, long-haul drivers stopped for repairs. Men from town came by just to drink coffee and argue about engines. But the new highway had been built 30 miles east, and traffic had disappeared almost overnight. Red Mesa had dried up, and Marcus had dried up with it. He walked into the office, which was barely cooler than the garage. The air conditioner in the window rattled like a coffee can full of screws. On the desk sat a stack of invoices, a cold cup of black coffee, and a framed photograph of his parents. His father, Walter Freeman, stood in that old photo with one hand on a toolbox and the other on Marcus's shoulder. His mother, Denise, smiled from the doorway of the garage, wearing a church dress and holding a paper plate covered in foil. Marcus touched the edge of the frame with 2 fingers. His father had always said, "Son, a man can be poor and still stand straight, as long as his name is still on the door." Marcus looked through the office glass at the crooked sign outside. His name was still there, for now, He picked up the foreclosure notice, folded it once, then unfolded it again. He did not know why. Maybe part of him hoped the numbers would change if he looked long enough. They did not. $6,200, 72 hours. Marcus let out a tired laugh with no joy in it. "I got 72 hours and about 72 cents, he said softly. Then he heard it. At first, it was nothing more than a low cough in the distance. Marcus froze. A man who has worked on engines his whole life does not hear noise the same way other people do. To most folks, a motorcycle coming down the road is just thunder and chrome. To Marcus, it was a story told in metal. This engine was hurting. It came from the old highway, coughing, choking, then roaring hard for a second before falling apart again. A big V-twin, running hot, misfiring under load, something electrical burning, maybe oil leaking near the head. Marcus stepped out of the office and walked to the open bay door. The desert sun hit him full in the face. Down the road, a motorcycle appeared through the heat shimmer. It was big, black, and mean-looking, with high bars, fat pipes, and a long custom frame. It limped toward the garage, trailing a thin ribbon of smoke. The engine barked once, popped twice, then nearly died. The rider kept it upright by sheer muscle. He was enormous. Even seated on that heavy machine, he looked too large for it. His arms were thick as fence posts, covered in old ink and sun-darkened scars. His beard was gray at the chin. His face looked carved from hard years and bad roads. But it was the leather vest that made Marcus's stomach tighten. Across the back was a pair of iron wings, spread wide around a skull-shaped gear. Above it, in bold white letters, were the words Iron Seraphs MC. Below it, Arizona. Marcus knew the name. Everybody in that part of the state knew the name. The Iron Seraphs were not weekend riders with shiny boots and clean bikes. They were old school, road-hardened, feared. Some called them criminals. Some called them brothers. Most people were careful not to call them anything to their faces. The motorcycle rolled into the cracked lot in front of Freeman Motor Works and gave one final angry cough. Then it died. The sudden silence felt heavy. The rider kicked down the stand with a steel-toed boot and climbed off. He stood at least 6'5", maybe more. He removed his gloves slowly, one finger at a time, never taking his eyes off Marcus. "You the mechanic?" the man asked. His voice was deep, rough, and dry, like gravel being dragged across concrete. Marcus wiped his hands on a rag. He felt fear move through him, but he did not let it reach his face. "I'm the one who keeps things running," Marcus said. "Name's Marcus Freeman. Folks call me Mac." The big man looked at the garage, then back at him. "Caleb Donovan," he said. "People call me Bear." Marcus glanced at the bike. "You rode that thing too far after it started complaining." Bear's eyes narrowed. "That right?" "That's right," Marcus said. "She's overheating. You've got oil where oil should not be. Electrical smell tells me something burned under the tank or near the ignition. If I had to guess, I'd say you kept pushing her another 20 or 30 miles after the first warning." For a long second, Bear said nothing. Then he gave a low grunt. 32. Marcus nodded toward the bike. "She told you to stop at 10. Bear stared at him. Then, for the first time, something almost like respect passed across his face. "I need it running by morning," Bear said. "I've got to be in Tucson tomorrow. Club business." Marcus looked at the bike, then at the empty shop, then back at the foreclosure notice taped to the office door behind him. Work was work, and right now, Marcus needed work badly enough to take it from the devil himself, if the devil rolled in on 2 wheels and paid cash. I'll look at it, Marcus said. Bear stepped closer. His shadow fell across Marcus's boots. I did not say look at it. I said, I need it running. Marcus lifted his eyes and met Bear's stare. And I said, I'll look at it, because a good mechanic does not promise a dead man he can dance until he checks the legs. The air between them tightened. A lesser man might have stepped back. Marcus did not. He had spent too many years being spoken to like he was less than a man. By bankers, by cops, by customers who assumed a black man with grease on his hands should be grateful for every dollar tossed his way. He had learned when to swallow his pride. He had also learned when not to. Bear looked him over slowly. Then the corner of his mouth moved, just barely. All right, Mac Freeman, he said. Check the legs. Before Marcus could answer, a dusty white van pulled into the lot, towing a small utility trailer. The van stopped too fast, kicking red dirt across the ground. A younger man jumped out. He wore a denim vest with a small patch that said Prospect. His face was nervous. His hands were quick. Bear, the young man called, rushing around to the side door. She's getting hot. The AC's barely blowing. The change in Bear was instant. The hard glare vanished. He turned away from Marcus as if the motorcycle no longer existed. Easy, Ricky, Bear said. I got her. His voice was still deep, but now it was softer, careful, almost gentle. Marcus watched as Bear opened the sliding door of the van. Inside, sitting against a stack of blankets, was a little girl. She looked about 10 years old, small for her age. Thin blonde brown hair stuck damply to her forehead. Her skin was pale from the heat, and her eyes had the exhausted look of a child who had been pretending not to hurt for too long. Heavy braces wrapped both of her legs. Beside her, half folded and jammed awkwardly against the seat, was a wheelchair. Even from 10 feet away, Marcus knew that chair was bad news. The right wheel leaned inward. The front caster hung crooked. The frame had a twist near the rear support. One armrest was cracked. The seat cushion had collapsed in the center, making it sag like an old mattress. Bear reached into the van and lifted the girl with a tenderness that did not seem possible from a man his size. She winced. "Daddy," she whispered, pressing her face against his leather vest. "My back hurts." "I know, little bird," Bear murmured. "I know. We're getting you out of this heat." "Little bird." The words landed strangely in the dusty lot. Marcus looked at the big biker again and saw something different. Not softer exactly, but deeper. A man could be dangerous and still be helpless when his child was hurting. Ricky pulled the wheelchair from the van and unfolded it. The metal frame scraped and popped. Marcus heard it. Not just the sound, the wrongness. A machine has a voice when it is not right. That chair was screaming. Bear lowered the girl into it as gently as he could. The moment her weight settled into the seat, she sucked in a breath and grabbed the armrests. Her face tightened. Bear saw it, and his jaw clenched. "Damn it," he said under his breath. Ricky looked ashamed. "I patted it, like you said." "You did what you could," Bear said, though his voice was strained. Marcus stepped closer, slowly. "What happened to the chair?" he asked. Bear looked at him as if he had forgotten Marcus was there. "Tie down snapped yesterday," he said. Chair bounced around in the trailer before Ricky could pull over. Medical supply place in Tucson said they can maybe order a new custom chair. 10 weeks, maybe 12. $7,000 if insurance does not fight us. He looked down at his daughter. This one was already too small for her. The girl tried to shift her hips. The chair creaked, and pain flashed across her face. Marcus felt something tighten behind his ribs. "What's her name?" he asked. Bear hesitated, as if names were not something he gave freely. Then he said, "Maya." Marcus lowered himself to one knee a few feet away from her, not too close. "Hi, Maya," he said. "I'm Marcus." The girl looked at him with tired eyes. "Are you fixing Daddy's motorcycle?" "I'm going to try. My daddy says it's stubborn." Marcus glanced at Bear. "Your daddy rode it like it owed him money." For the first time, Maya smiled a little. Bear gave Marcus a hard look, but there was no anger in it. Marcus stood and nodded toward the office. "It's cooler inside. AC sounds like it's dying, but it still blows cold enough to matter. She can rest in there while I look at the bike." Bear looked toward the office, then back at Marcus. "You sure?" Marcus opened the office door. "I would not offer if I was not sure." Ricky pushed the chair toward the office. The front wheel caught on a crack in the concrete. The whole chair jolted. Maya cried out. It was not loud. That made it worse. Bear's hands tightened into fists. Marcus stepped forward. "Hold up." He crouched and looked at the caster, then the axle, then the sagging seat. His mechanic's eyes moved over every inch. The chair was not just damaged, it was hurting her. The bent frame forced her weight to one side. The broken caster made every little bump twist through the whole chair. The bad bearings meant the wheels dragged instead of rolled. The seat gave her no support at all. Marcus had worked on engines that were treated better than this child's spine. He stood slowly. Bear noticed his face. "What?" Bear asked. Marcus chose his words carefully. "That chair needs more than padding." Bear's expression darkened. "You think I don't know that?" "I think you know your daughter's hurting," Marcus said. "And I think you've been doing the best you can with a bad piece of equipment." The answer took some of the fire out of Bear's eyes. Maya looked up at Marcus. "Can I sit in the office now?" Marcus softened his voice. "Yes, ma'am. We'll get you inside." This time, Marcus lifted the front of the chair slightly over the cracked concrete so it would not jolt. Ricky guided from behind. Bear walked beside Maya, one hand hovering near her shoulder as if he could catch pain before it reached her. Inside the office, Marcus moved a box of old parts off the better chair, wiped the vinyl seat with his rag, then thought better of it and pulled a clean towel from a drawer. "You can use the sofa if that's better," he said. Bear looked at Maya. "Want to stretch out, little bird?" Maya nodded. Bear lifted her from the wheelchair and laid her carefully on the old leather sofa. Marcus folded another towel under her knees. The girl let out a small breath of relief. The office was shabby. The blinds were bent. The desk was scarred. The air conditioner rattled in the window, but it was cool. For Maya, that was enough. Bear stood over her for a moment, brushing damp hair from her forehead with his huge hand. "I'll find us a motel," he said. "You rest. Don't let them be mean to your bike," she whispered. Bear glanced at Marcus. "Mr. Freeman says she can still dance." Marcus lifted one eyebrow. "I said I'd check the legs." Maya smiled again, just a little. Bear stepped back into the garage with Marcus. The softness left his face, but not completely. Now Marcus had seen what lived underneath, the leather and scars. Bear pulled a thick roll of cash from his pocket. "I don't care what it costs," he said. "I need that bike ready by 7 in the morning." Marcus looked at the money, then at the motorcycle, then through the office window, at Maya lying stiffly on the sofa, trying not to move too much. "I'll do what I can," Marcus said. Bear leaned close. "No, you'll do what has to be done." Marcus met his eyes. "That is usually what I do." For a long second, they stood there, Two men from very different worlds, both too proud to look away. Then Bear nodded once. Ricky and I are going to find a room. She stays here until I get back. She can stay, Marcus said. Bear pointed toward the motorcycle. That machine means a lot to me. Marcus nodded toward the office. She means more. Bear's face changed again. Not much, but enough. 7 in the morning, he said. 7, Marcus replied. Bear climbed into the van with Ricky. The van rolled out first, slow and careful. Maya raised one hand weakly through the window as they passed the office. Marcus raised his hand back. Then the van disappeared down the road toward town, leaving behind the dead motorcycle, the damaged wheelchair, and the long red light of the evening sun. The desert grew quiet again. Marcus stood alone in the garage. He should have gone straight to the bike. He needed the money. He needed every dollar Bear would pay him. $6,200 did not appear by magic. Banks did not care about good intentions. Foreclosure agents did not pause because a man had a hard week. Marcus walked to the office door and looked at the notice. 72 hours. Then he looked through the glass. Maya had fallen asleep on the sofa. Even sleeping, her face was tight. Her hands were curled near her chest. Her body seemed afraid to relax, as if rest itself might hurt. Beside the office wall sat the wheelchair, crooked, bent, waiting. Marcus turned and looked toward the back corner of the garage. Under a gray tarp was the most valuable thing he had left: a custom mini independent suspension setup, 2 lightweight alloy wheels, high-grade bearings, and a pair of small coilover shocks from an off-road racing project that never got finished. A buyer in Phoenix had offered him $4,500 cash for the lot. Not enough to save Freeman Motor Works, but enough to beg the bank for more time. Enough to keep the lights on another month. Enough to maybe keep his father's name on that door just a little longer. Marcus walked to the tarp and stopped. His phone buzzed on the workbench. He picked it up. A message from the buyer. Still good for tomorrow. Cash in hand. Don't sell those parts to anybody else. Marcus stared at the screen. Then he looked back at Maya. He remembered his mother in the last year of her life, sitting in a cheap wheelchair from a discount medical store, pretending it did not hurt because she did not want her son spending money he did not have. He remembered adjusting pillows behind her back. He remembered the way she smiled and lied. I'm fine, baby. She had not been fine. Marcus set the phone down. Outside, the sun dipped lower, painting the desert in copper and blood-red light. Inside the garage, the dead motorcycle ticked softly as it cooled. The wheelchair waited in the corner like a bad answer to a question nobody wanted to ask. Marcus rubbed his injured knuckles with his thumb. A man could lose a business. A man could lose money. A man could lose sleep. But there were some things a man could not look away from and still respect himself in the morning. Marcus reached up, grabbed the edge of the gray tarp, and pulled it away. The expensive parts gleamed under the shop lights. He stood there for a moment, quiet and still. Then he whispered to himself, "There are some debts that never get printed on paper." He turned toward the motorcycle first, because he had made a promise. Then his eyes moved back to the wheelchair, because now he had made another one. Marcus did not start with the wheelchair. He started with the motorcycle, because a promise is a promise. And because a man like Caleb Donovan did not make requests twice. The shop lights buzzed overhead as Marcus rolled the heavy black bike onto the lift. He locked the front wheel, wiped his hands on a clean rag, and stood still for a second, listening. Even quiet machines speak. Heat clicked through the metal. Oil dripped somewhere it should not. The smell coming off the engine told him more than any manual ever could. "All right," Marcus muttered. "Let's see what you did to yourself." He pulled the seat, then the tank, then the side covers. Each bolt came loose under practiced hands. Each part found its place on a clean section of the workbench. Marcus did not rush. Rushing got people hurt. Rushing got machines killed. Within 20 minutes, the truth was laid bare. The head gasket was blown, just like he had guessed. Oil had been leaking and cooking itself against the engine. The stator wires were scorched, insulation brittle and cracked. One section had melted just enough to short intermittently, which explained the coughing and dying under load. He leaned in closer. "You really didn't want to stop, did you?" he said quietly. He replaced what he could from his shelves. Marcus was not just a mechanic. He was a saver. Every old part that still had life left in it had a place. Every bolt, every bracket, every length of wire had been sorted, cleaned, labeled. That habit had kept him alive more than once. Piece by piece, the engine came back together. He cleaned the mating surfaces, set a new gasket, torqued the head bolts evenly. He rewired the damaged section, not just patching it, but routing it cleaner than before, so heat would not get to it again. He drained the oil, flushed the lines, replaced the filter, and filled it fresh. He worked steady. No wasted motion, no drama, no shortcuts. By 10:15 p.m., the hard part was done. The bike sat there quiet, rebuilt where it mattered, waiting for the sealant to cure before he could fire it up in the morning. Marcus wiped his hands, flexed his fingers, and leaned back against the workbench. He should have been tired. He was, but something else had taken hold of his mind. He looked through the glass into the office. Maya had shifted slightly on the sofa. Even in sleep, she was careful. Her body moved like it expected pain every time it changed position. The wheelchair sat near the wall. Crooked, silent, wrong. Marcus picked up his coffee. It was cold. He drank it anyway. Then he walked into the office. He did not turn on any extra lights. The glow from the garage was enough. He moved slowly so he would not wake her. Up close, the wheelchair looked worse than before. Marcus crouched down beside it. He ran his fingers along the frame. Bent. Not a little bent. Twisted just enough to throw everything off. He spun the right wheel. It wobbled. He stopped it, then pressed down lightly on the seat. The cushions sank deep in the middle. "No support," he whispered. He checked the bearings. Dry. Grinding. He lifted the front caster and turned it. It stuck, then jerked. Every little bump on a sidewalk would send a shock through that frame, straight into her spine. Marcus sat back on his heels. He closed his eyes for a moment. He could fix this. Not perfectly, not like a custom medical manufacturer with weeks of time and a full lab, but he could make it better. A lot better. He stood and walked back into the garage. The gray tarp waited in the corner. He stopped in front of it again. His phone buzzed once more. Same number, same buyer. "You good for tomorrow morning? I'll be there early." Marcus stared at the message. $4,500. That was groceries. That was time. That was maybe one more shot with the bank. He could almost hear the loan officer's voice. "Mr. Freeman, if you can make a partial payment, we might be able to delay proceedings." Might. Maybe. Possibly. Marcus looked at the tarp. Then he looked at the office. Through the glass, Maya shifted again. Her face tightened. Even asleep, she could not escape it. Marcus let out a slow breath. He picked up his phone. Typed, "Can't sell." Something came up. He stared at the message, then hit send. The phone buzzed back almost immediately. "You serious? I told you I got cash." Marcus set the phone down without answering. "That's the problem," he said quietly. "You got cash. She's got pain." He grabbed the edge of the tarp, pulled it off. The parts underneath looked almost too clean for that shop. Lightweight alloy wheels, compact coilover shocks, a small independent suspension system he had salvaged from a wrecked off-road racer months ago. He had kept them for a dream project, or for a day when he had no other choice. Marcus rolled the broken wheelchair into the center of the bay, set it under the bright light. He stood there for a long second. Then he got to work. The first cut was the hardest. Marcus picked up the angle grinder, fitted a fresh disc, and flipped the switch. The machine screamed to life. He hesitated for just a second. Then he brought it down against the bent section of the frame. Sparks flew, bright orange, scattering across the concrete like fireworks in the dark. The metal gave way, not easily, but it gave. Piece by piece, Marcus removed what could not be saved. He did not try to pretend the old chair could be fixed with a few adjustments. It could not. It needed to be rebuilt. He measured the remaining frame, checked alignment, marked where he would reinforce. He pulled lengths of high-grade aluminum from a rack in the back, pieces he had saved from a previous job that never paid. "Guess you're getting used after all," he muttered. He cut them to size, clamped them in place. Then the welder came out. The TIG torch hummed, a steady, focused sound. Marcus worked in silence, except for the crackle of the arc. The smell of hot metal filled the air. He welded clean, slow, controlled beads. Not pretty for show, strong for life. Midnight came, then passed. Marcus did not look at the clock. He did not need to. Time had narrowed to one thing: make it right. Around 1:30 a.m., the new rear geometry started to take shape. Marcus adapted the small suspension system, mounting the shocks in a way that would absorb vertical impact without making the chair unstable. He paused, ran the math in his head, tested the angle, adjusted. "Too stiff," he said. He loosened one mount, changed the leverage ratio slightly, then tightened it again. "That's better." He mounted the alloy wheels. They were lighter than the originals by a wide margin. He fitted new bearings, smooth, silent. He spun one. It turned without resistance. "That's what it's supposed to feel like," he murmured. He added a simple but effective brake adjustment, making sure Maya, or whoever pushed her, would not have to fight the chair to stop it. By 3 a.m., his hands were bleeding again. Small cuts from sharp edges, burn marks from careless contact. His back ached, his eyes burned. But the frame was done, strong, aligned, ready. The chair rolled across the floor now, without wobbling, without that ugly dragging sound. But Marcus was not finished, not even close. He walked to a shelf near the back, dug through a stack of upholstery materials. There it was, a sheet of memory foam he had bought to redo the seat of a classic car that never came back to claim it. He pulled it down, laid it on the bench. He cut it carefully, layered it, shaped it to support the hips, the lower back, the spine. He pressed down with his hands. It gave, then held. "Good," he said. He covered it in a soft, durable leather he had kept for special jobs. Not the cheap stuff. The kind that did not trap heat. The kind that lasted. He stitched it by hand, slowly. Every pull of the thread deliberate. Every seam tight. His fingers cramped. He shook them out. Kept going. At 5:10 a.m., the sky outside began to change. The black of night softened into deep purple, then into a bruised red along the horizon. Marcus tightened the last bolt, set the chair down fully. he stepped back. For the first time all night, he really looked at it. It was still a wheelchair. It was not some miracle machine, but it was straight, balanced, clean, strong. The wheels sat true. The suspension rested ready. The seat looked comfortable. Right. Marcus walked over and pushed it with one finger. The chair rolled, smooth, silent. It crossed the same crack in the concrete that had made it jerk the day before. It did not even flinch. Marcus let out a long breath he had not realized he was holding. He turned to the motorcycle, hooked up the battery, checked connections. Then he swung his leg over and kicked the starter. The engine roared to life. Strong, even. No cough, no hesitation. Just that deep, steady rumble that said everything was finally where it belonged. Marcus listened for a few seconds, then killed the engine. Silence filled the shop again. He leaned back against the workbench and closed his eyes. He had just given away the only thing he had left that could have saved his business. He knew that. There was no pretending otherwise. The parts under that tarp had been his last bargaining chip. Now they were welded into a chair. He was still going to lose Freeman Motor Works, still going to be out on the street in a few days, still going to have to figure out how to start over at 44 with nothing but tools and a reputation that might not follow him far. Marcus opened his eyes, looked at the chair. Then he smiled, just a little. "A man's got to sleep at night," he said, quietly, and for the first time in a long time, he knew he would. At 6:45 a.m., he went into the office. Maya was still asleep, but her face looked different, less tight, less guarded. Marcus did not wake her. He lifted her gently, careful of her back, and adjusted her position on the sofa so she lay straighter. He covered her with a clean blanket. Then he wheeled the new chair into the main bay, placed it where the morning light would hit it. He wiped his hands on a rag, waited. At exactly 7 a.m., he heard the sound of tires on gravel. The van was back, and with it, the man who had no idea what had been built while he was gone. The van rolled into the lot just as the sun cleared the horizon. Morning light spread across Red Mesa, soft at first, then sharper by the second. It caught the dust in the air, turned it gold, and lit up the cracked concrete in front of Freeman Motor Works. Marcus was already standing by the open bay door. He had washed his face, but there was no hiding the night on him. His eyes were red, his hands still cut, his shirt stained with oil and metal dust. He held a rag loosely in one hand, more out of habit than need. The van door slid open. Caleb stepped out first. He looked rested, but his eyes went immediately to the motorcycle. Marcus nodded toward it. "She'll run," he said. I replaced the head gasket, rewired the burned section, flushed the oil system, tuned the carb. You can ride her hard again, but give her a few miles to warm up first. Caleb walked over to the bike, ran a hand along the tank, then checked the throttle. He did not rush. He listened, the same way Marcus had listened. Then he looked back. "How much?" Caleb asked. Marcus walked to the counter, pulled a folded piece of paper from under a wrench, and set it down. "Parts and labor," he said. 600. Caleb raised an eyebrow. "You undercharging me?" "Nugged. I'm charging for the work I did, not for the miles you put on it before you got here." Caleb stared at him for a second, then pulled a thick roll of bills from his pocket. He counted out 700 and placed it on the counter. "Keep the extra," he said. Marcus nodded once and took the money. It was not enough to save the shop, but it was something real, something earned. Caleb turned toward the van. "Where's Maya?" he asked. Marcus hesitated just a fraction. She's still inside, he said. Sleeping. But before you wake her, there's something I need to show you. Caleb's expression shifted. Cautious now, Marcus walked toward the center of the garage. The chair stood there in the morning light, no longer twisted or tired looking. The frame sat straight, reinforced where it needed to be, the new wheels catching the sunlight, the seat clean and shaped with care. Caleb stopped a few feet away. He did not speak right away. His eyes moved slowly from the wheels to the suspension, then to the seat, then to the welds. He crouched, pressed his thumb against one of the joints, then ran his hand along the frame. "This is not the same chair," he said quietly. "No," Marcus answered. Caleb stood and turned toward him. "You built this last night?" Marcus wiped his hands on the rag, buying himself a second. "I rebuilt what could be saved," he said. "The frame was twisted, so I cut out the bad sections and reinforced it. I added a suspension system to take the shock out of rough ground, replaced the bearings, changed the wheel setup, fixed the alignment, and rebuilt the seat so her back sits right." Caleb's eyes narrowed slightly. "With what parts?" Marcus glanced toward the empty corner where the tarp had been. "With what I had," he said. Caleb followed his gaze. He did not miss much. "You had something worth money back there," Caleb said. Marcus did not answer that directly. "I had something that could be used," he said instead. Silence settled between them for a moment. Ricky stepped into the garage behind Caleb and looked at the chair. His eyes widened. "Man, that looks like something out of a catalog," he said. Caleb ignored him. He walked around the chair once more, slower this time. Then he looked Marcus in the eye. "How much?" he asked. Marcus shook his head. "I already charged you for the bike." "That's not what I asked," Caleb said. "How much for the chair?" Marcus leaned back against the workbench. "There's no charge for that." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Don't play games with me," he said, his voice dropping. "That's not a quick fix. That's hours of work. That's parts you didn't get from a scrap pile." Marcus held his gaze. "I didn't build it for money," he said. Caleb took a step closer. "Then why?" Marcus did not raise his voice. "Because your daughter shouldn't have to hurt every time she sits down." The words landed heavy. Ricky looked from one man to the other, unsure what to say. Caleb stood still, his breathing slow, controlled. The hard edge in his face did not disappear, but something deeper moved behind it. "You're telling me you spent the night tearing into that chair, using your own parts, knowing you've got a foreclosure notice on your door, and you're not asking for a dime?" Marcus did not flinch. "That's what I'm telling you." Caleb stared at him for a long moment. Then he nodded once. "All right," he said. "Let's see what she thinks." Marcus walked into the office first. Maya was still asleep, curled slightly under the blanket. "Hey," Marcus said softly. "Maya." Her eyes fluttered open. For a second, she looked confused, and she remembered where she was. "Is Daddy back?" she asked. "He's here," Marcus said, "but I want to show you something before he wakes you up fully." Caleb stepped in behind him. "Morning, little bird," he said. Maya smiled weakly. "Morning." Marcus knelt beside the sofa. "We made a few changes to your chair," he said. "Nothing fancy, just wanted to see if it might feel better." Maya looked toward the garage. "Is it still the same one?" she asked. "It's still yours," Marcus said. Caleb lifted her carefully, just like before, but this time Marcus guided him toward the new chair. "Set her down slow," Marcus said. Caleb did. Maya braced herself. Her hands gripped the armrests, her shoulders tightened. She lowered herself into the seat, expecting the same sharp pain, the same wrong angle, the same pressure that made her want to cry. But it did not come. Her body settled. The seat supported her hips instead of collapsing under them. Her back rested against something that held her upright without forcing her forward. The chair did not twist. Maya blinked. She shifted slightly. No pain. She pushed gently against the wheels. The chair moved, not with effort and grinding resistance, but smoothly, easily, like it was meant to move. Maya's eyes widened. She leaned back, then forward, testing. "Daddy," she said, her voice soft at first, then louder. "Daddy, it doesn't hurt." Caleb froze. Maya looked up at him, a smile spreading across her face. "It doesn't hurt. It feels like it's holding me right." Caleb's hands tightened around the handles behind the chair. His knuckles turned white. He swallowed once, hard. "Let me see," he said. He pushed the chair forward. It rolled over the uneven floor of the office without that familiar jolt. He guided it out into the garage, over the same crack in the concrete. The chair absorbed it. Maya did not flinch. Caleb stopped. He looked down at her. Then he looked at Marcus. "You did this," he said. Marcus shrugged slightly. "I made it better." Caleb shook his head. "No," he said. "You changed it." Maya spun the wheels again, laughing now, a real laugh that filled the garage. "Daddy, I can move it by myself," she said. "That's because it's not fighting you anymore," Marcus said. Caleb let go of the handles slowly. He stepped back. For a man his size, his voice came out quieter than expected. "How much did this cost you?" he asked. Marcus did not answer right away. Caleb stepped closer. "I'm not asking what I owe you," he said. "I'm asking what you gave up." Marcus met his eyes. "I had a set of parts I was going to sell," he said. "Would have bought me some time with the bank. Maybe." Caleb's expression hardened. "And you used them on this?" Marcus nodded. Caleb let out a breath through his nose. "You're 3 days from losing this place," he said, gesturing around the shop. "And you gave up your last shot at holding onto it for a kid you met yesterday." Marcus leaned back against the bench again. "Not for a kid I met yesterday," he said. "For a kid who was in pain today." Silence filled the garage again. This time, it was different. Not tense, heavy. Ricky shifted his weight, looking like he had just witnessed something he did not fully understand. Caleb looked at Marcus for a long moment. Then he reached out and pushed the chair once more, watching how it moved, how Maya sat in it, how her body finally looked at ease. He nodded slowly. "All right," he said. Marcus tilted his head slightly. "All right, what?" Caleb looked at him. Something settled now behind his eyes. "All right, Mac Freeman," he said. "We'll talk tomorrow." Marcus frowned. "About what?" Caleb did not answer directly. "About what a man does when somebody takes care of his family," he said. He turned toward the van. "Ricky, load the chair. Carefully." Ricky nodded immediately. "Yes, sir." Maya looked at Marcus. "Thank you," she said. It was simple. It was small. But it carried more weight than anything Caleb could have said. Marcus gave her a small smile. "You take it easy on that thing," he said. "It's built for you, not for racing your dad." Maya giggled. "I'll win anyway." Caleb snorted. "We'll see about that." He helped Ricky load the chair into the van, treating it with a care Marcus had not expected from men like them. Then Caleb cycle. He looked at Marcus one last time. "You're a good man," he said. "Don't forget that." Marcus did not answer. He just nodded. The engine roared to life, strong and clean. Caleb pulled out of the lot, the van following behind. Maya waved through the window again. Marcus raised his hand. Then they were gone. The dust settled. The sound faded. The garage grew quiet again. Marcus stood there in the doorway, feeling the $700 in his pocket. It would buy food, maybe cover the electric bill. It would not save the shop. He walked back inside. The empty corner where the tarp had been seemed larger now. The absence of those parts felt real. So did the decision. Marcus looked at the foreclosure notice on the door. Tomorrow. That was the word that mattered now. Tomorrow the bank would come. Tomorrow he would lose Freeman Motor Works. He turned off the shop lights, locked the front door, walked into the back room, lay down on the old cot and stared at the ceiling. For once, his mind did not race. For once, the weight on his chest felt different. Still heavy, but not wrong. He closed his eyes. "I did right," he said to no one. Then he slept. He slept like a man who had nothing left to bargain with, but nothing left to regret either. He did not know what was coming in the morning. He did not know that the road he had stepped onto with that one decision was about to bring an entire brotherhood to his door. All he knew was that somewhere out there, a little girl was sitting without pain. And for Marcus Freeman, that was enough. For now, for 3 months after that morning, Marcus Freeman's life did something he had almost forgotten was possible. It moved forward. Freeman Motor Works did not just survive, it came alive. The first week after Caleb left, a handful of bikes rolled in, then more, then trucks, then cars. Word had spread, not in advertisements or online reviews, but the old way, from rider to rider, from one trusted voice to another. There's a shop out in Red Mesa. Guy there knows what he's doing, treats people right. That was all it took. By the end of the second month, Marcus was working longer hours than ever, but it felt different, not desperate, not like he was trying to outrun a debt that kept growing behind him. This time, every job pushed him a little further ahead. Darius came on full-time, learning fast, asking questions, making mistakes, then fixing them. Elena handled welding jobs with a steady hand and an eye for clean work that impressed even the bikers who rarely gave compliments. And every Sunday, like clockwork, Caleb showed up. The sound of his engine would carry across the desert long before he rolled into the lot. Maya would be with him, sitting in her rebuilt chair, no longer stiff with pain, no longer afraid to move. Marcus always kept a cold drink ready for her in the office fridge. She always asked if she could watch him work. He always said yes. Somewhere along the way, without anyone saying it out loud, Freeman Motor Works became more than a shop. It became a place people trusted, and in a town like Red Mesa, trust was worth more than money. But not everyone saw it that way. Sheriff Nolan Price watched it all from a distance. He had been in Red Mesa for 12 years, long enough to know who owned what, who owed what, and who could be pushed when the time came. Freeman Motor Works had been part of a larger plan. The land it sat on, along that old highway, had value again. A development group out of Phoenix had been quietly buying up properties, preparing for a new service corridor to support traffic rerouted from the interstate. Truck stops, repair yards, retail space, big money. Price had made sure the right properties fell into the right hands. Banks got pressure where they needed it. Inspections happened at convenient times. Permits were delayed for some and rushed through for others. Marcus Freeman had been an easy target, a struggling business, a black owner with no political backing, a man who kept his head down and did not fight, until he did, until the debt disappeared overnight, until a group like Iron Seraphs started using his shop. That was when Marcus stopped being invisible, and that was when he became a problem. Price did not move fast. Men like him never did. He started with small things. A patrol car parked across the street during business hours, engine running, officer watching. A routine inspection that lasted 2 hours and ended with no violations but left customers uneasy. A couple of traffic stops for bikers leaving the shop. Tickets written for minor issues that would normally be ignored. Nothing illegal, nothing obvious, just enough to remind Marcus that someone was paying attention. Marcus noticed. Of course he noticed, but he did not react. He installed a second camera system, smaller and harder to see. He began scanning every invoice, every receipt, and uploading them to a secure cloud account. He kept physical copies in a locked cabinet and digital copies backed up twice. He told Darius and Eleanor, "From now on, every part that comes in, every part that goes out, we document it, no exceptions." Darius nodded. Eleanor asked why. Marcus answered simply, "Because if somebody wants to say we did something wrong, I want to be able to show we didn't." He did not say Price's name. He did not have to. The storm broke on a Thursday afternoon. The heat had settled in early that day, the kind of dry, pressing heat that made the air feel thick, even though there was no humidity. Marcus was under a lifted truck, guiding Darius through a carburetor adjustment. "Ease that screw back," Marcus said. "Not too much. You're not forcing it, you're finding where it wants to sit." Darius leaned in. "Like this? Little more. There you go." The sound came then. Not a motorcycle, not a truck. Sirens. 3 of them. Loud. Close. Marcus rolled out from under the truck before the first cruiser even hit the lot. They came in fast, tires crunching gravel, dust rising behind them in thick clouds. Sheriff Nolan Price stepped out of the lead vehicle. He was tall, clean-shaven, with a uniform pressed sharp enough to cut. His badge caught the sunlight. His eyes did not. Behind him, 6 deputies moved into position. Shotguns, hands on holsters. Too much force for a simple visit. Marcus wiped his hands, slowly, on a rag. "What's going on, Sheriff?" he asked. Price did not answer right away. He walked forward, boots steady, eyes scanning the garage, the bikes, the tools, the people. Then he stopped in front of Marcus. "You're under investigation, Mr. Freeman," he said, "for operating an illegal chop shop, receiving stolen property, and facilitating the alteration of vehicle identification numbers." Darius looked up, confused. Elena stepped closer, her brow tightening. Marcus stayed where he was. "That's not true," he said calmly. "You know it's not true." Price's lips curved just slightly. "We'll see what the evidence says." He turned to his deputies, but search the premises. They moved in immediately, not careful, not respectful. They opened toolboxes, pulled drawers, knocked over containers. One deputy shoved a stack of labeled parts bins off a shelf, sending them crashing to the floor. "Hey," Darius snapped, stepping forward. "Back up," another deputy barked, pushing him in the chest. Elena grabbed Darius's arm. "Don't," she whispered. Marcus watched everything, every move, every hand. His eyes flicked once, briefly, toward the small camera mounted above the back shelf. Still in place, still recording. Good. Price walked slowly through the garage, like he owned it. He stopped near a shelf in the back. One of his deputies called out, "Got something here?" Marcus's attention sharpened. The deputy held up a small box of parts. Metal. Clean. Too clean. Price took the box, opened it, and pulled out a component with a partially ground serial number. He held it up. "Care to explain this?" he asked. Marcus's stomach dropped. "That's not mine," he said immediately. "That was not on that shelf this morning." Price looked at him like a teacher catching a child Everything on this property is your responsibility, he said. That was planted, Marcus replied, his voice tightening just a little. Price stepped closer. You're saying a sworn officer of the law planted evidence in your shop, he asked. Marcus held his ground. I'm saying that part did not come from me, and you know it. Price did not argue. He did not need to. He had what he wanted. He turned to his deputies. Take him in. Two men stepped forward. Marcus did not resist. He let them grab his arms, pull them behind his back, and snap cold steel cuffs around his wrists. Darius shouted, "This is wrong!" Elena yelled, "You can't just do this!" Price ignored them. "Secure the computers," he ordered. "Seize all records. Impound every vehicle currently on the lot, pending investigation." That was when Marcus felt it. Not fear. Not yet. Something colder. The bikes. There were 6 motorcycles in the shop that belonged to Iron Seraphs. Custom builds. Expensive. Personal. If those bikes disappeared under his watch, if they were damaged, or worse, if it looked like Marcus had anything to do with it. He closed his eyes for half a second, then opened them again. "You don't have a warrant to take those bikes," he said. Price leaned in, close enough that only Marcus could hear him. "I have enough," he whispered, "and if I don't, I'll get it after the fact." He stepped back. "Load them," he said. A tow truck backed into the lot. One by one, the bikes were lifted, strapped, and hauled away. Marcus watched every second, every strap, every movement, every mistake. He memorized it all. Because if he got the chance, he would need to tell the truth clearly, even if nobody wanted to hear it. The ride to the county jail was quiet. Too quiet. The air in the back of the cruiser was hot. The vents barely worked. The cuffs bit into Marcus's wrists every time the car hit a bump. He stared through the wire mesh at the road ahead. Dust, sky, nothing else. For the first time in months, that old weight came back. Heavy, cold, pressing. Not just the fear of losing the shop, something worse. The thought that everything he had built back up could be taken again, that the people who had trusted him could be hurt because of him, that Maya might hear that the man who fixed her chair had been taken away in handcuffs. Marcus clenched his jaw. "No," he whispered under his breath. "Not like this. They processed him at the jail like any other arrest. Name, prints, photograph, property bag. His clothes replaced with a stiff orange uniform. The man who ran Freeman Motor Works, who had rebuilt engines and changed lives in small, quiet ways, became an inmate number on a clipboard. They put him in a holding cell. Concrete walls, metal bench, harsh light. The door slammed shut, with a sound that echoed longer than it should have. Marcus sat down slowly. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped as best he could with the cuffs. He thought about the garage, Darius, Elena, the bikes, Maya, Caleb, Zeke. He knew how men like Price worked. This was not about law, this was about pressure. And pressure always came with an offer. It came at midnight. The cell door opened. Sheriff Nolan Price stepped inside, this time without the crowd, without the noise, without the show, just him, and one deputy at the door. Price held a thin folder in his hand. He walked in like he was entering his own office. "Comfortable?" he asked. Marcus did not stand. He looked up slowly. "What do you want?" he asked. Price smiled faintly. "I want to help you," he said. Marcus almost laughed. "Then you picked a strange way to show it." Price ignored the comment. He opened the folder and pulled out a document. "This," he said, holding it up, "is a transfer agreement. You sign this, and Freeman Motor Works is sold to a holding company. Quietly, cleanly." Marcus stared at the paper. And in return, he asked. Price stepped closer. In return, the charges disappear. The investigation ends. The bikes are returned. You walk out of here tomorrow morning a free man. Marcus leaned back against the wall. And if I don't sign? Price's smile thinned. Then I push this to the county prosecutor, then to the state, maybe even federal, depending on how the story plays. Chop shop, stolen parts, organized crime connections. I make it stick. He crouched down so they were eye level. And while all that's happening, those motorcycles sitting in the impound yard start having problems. Parts go missing, frames get scratched, maybe one or two get damaged beyond repair. And I make sure the report says they were seized from your shop. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. Price leaned even closer. And then, he whispered, word gets out that you cooperated, that you gave us names to save your own skin. You think those men out there will see you as a victim? He let the question hang. Marcus did not answer. He did not need to. They both knew the answer. Price stood and held out a pen. Sign it, he said. Give me the land and you keep your life. Marcus looked at the pen, then at the paper, then at Price. He thought about the first day his father handed him a wrench. He thought about his mother sitting in that broken chair. He thought about Maya's face when she said, "It doesn't hurt." He thought about Darius, about Eleanor, about the trust that had been placed in him. He thought about Caleb's words, "You're a good man. Don't forget that." Marcus reached out. Price's smile widened. Then Marcus knocked the folder out of his hand. Papers scattered across the floor. The pen clattered against the concrete. "Go to hell," Marcus said. His voice was not loud. It did not need to be. Price's face changed instantly. The mask slipped. He struck Marcus across the face with a sharp, controlled blow that sent him sideways off the bench. The deputy stepped in and drove a boot into Marcus's side. Pain exploded through his ribs. Marcus curled instinctively, then forced himself to breathe through it. Price straightened his uniform. "You had your chance," he said coldly. "Enjoy what comes next." He turned and walked out. The door slammed shut again. Marcus lay on the floor for a long moment. Every breath hurt. Every movement reminded him of what he had just chosen. He could have signed. He could have walked out. He could have saved himself. But there are some things a man does not trade. Not for money, not for safety, not for fear. Marcus pushed himself up slowly and sat back on the bench. He wiped blood from his lip with the back of his hand. Then he looked at the door. "Not like this," he said quietly. Outside that cell, the world was already starting to move. Because in Red Mesa and far beyond it, there were people who understood exactly what Marcus Freeman had just done. And they were not going to let him stand alone. Morning came slower inside a jail cell. Marcus did not sleep much after Sheriff Price left. Every breath reminded him of the kick to his ribs. Every time he shifted, pain followed. But the pain did not bother him as much as the waiting. He sat on the metal bench, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. He had made his choice. Now he would live with it. What Marcus did not see was everything that had already started moving outside those walls. Eleanor did not wait long after Marcus was taken. The moment the cruisers left, she grabbed her phone and called Caleb. She did not panic. She spoke clearly. "They took Marcus, said it's a chop shop investigation. They're taking the bikes too." There was a pause on the other end. Then Caleb said one word. "Where?" Within 20 minutes, the news had reached Zeke Cross. Within an hour, it had reached people far beyond Red Mesa. And by the time the sun rose fully over the desert, The first move had already been made. At 8:30 a.m., a black SUV pulled into the county courthouse parking lot. A woman stepped out. She wore a tailored dark suit, her hair pulled back, her posture straight and unhurried. She carried a leather briefcase and a look that made people move out of her way without being told. Her name was Nadia Harlow, civil rights attorney, known in Phoenix, in Tucson, and in more than a few courtrooms across the state. She did not knock. She walked straight into the clerk's office and placed a stack of papers on the counter. "I'm filing an emergency motion for release," she said, "and a request for preservation of evidence related to the arrest of Marcus Freeman." The clerk blinked. "Do you have representation filed?" "I am representation," Nadia said, "and I suggest you process that quickly." At the same time, something else was happening across town. The impound lot sat behind a chain-link fence, guarded by a small booth and a man who had never expected trouble beyond the occasional angry driver. That morning, he looked up from his coffee and froze. Motorcycles, dozens of them. They did not rush in. They did not rev their engines. They pulled up slowly, one by one, and parked along the fence. Men and women in leather vests stepped off their bikes and stood there, arms crossed, silent, watching. Caleb stood at the front. He did not shout. He did not threaten. He just stood there, looking at the lot where the bikes from Freeman Motor Works had been taken. The man in the booth picked up his radio with shaking hands. I think we got a situation," he said. But by the time he finished speaking, the line was already busy, because all available units had been called somewhere else. Back at the jail, Marcus heard the door open again. He looked up slowly. This time, it was not Sheriff Price. It was a corrections officer, nervous, standing beside Nadia Harlow. "Marcus Freeman?" she asked. Marcus stood carefully. "That's me." Nadia stepped closer. "I'm your attorney," she said. "You've had a very interesting night." Marcus frowned slightly. "I didn't call a lawyer." "No," she said, "you didn't." She adjusted the folder in her hands, but someone who understands loyalty did. Marcus said nothing. He did not need to ask who. Within hours, things began to unravel. Nadia moved fast. She filed motions. She demanded access to evidence. She requested camera footage from the garage. She brought up the lack of proper warrant scope. She questioned the chain of custody for the so-called stolen parts. She pushed. Hard. At the same time, Elena accessed the backup files Marcus had been saving. Invoices, receipts, serial numbers, everything clean, everything traceable. And then she found it. The hidden camera. The one Marcus had installed quietly, just in case. The footage showed a deputy entering the shop the night before the raid. It showed him placing the box of parts on the shelf. It showed everything. By midday, the story had changed. By afternoon, it had spread. A local business owner arrested under questionable circumstances. Evidence that did not match the timeline. Video footage suggesting planted parts. A sheriff with ties to a development group that wanted the land. It was no longer a quiet situation. It was a problem for Sheriff Nolan Price. Marcus walked out of the jail just after 3 p.m. The sunlight hit him hard after the dim interior. He squinted, raising a hand to his face. Then he stopped. The parking lot was not empty. Caleb stood by his truck. Zeke stood beside him. Darius and Elena were there, and behind them, lined up in quiet formation, were members of Iron Seraphs. Not shouting, not cheering, just present, waiting. Marcus walked down the steps slowly. His ribs hurt, his jaw ached, but he walked straight. Caleb stepped forward. "You okay?" he asked. Marcus gave a small nod. "I've been worse," he said. Caleb looked at him for a long second. "You didn't sign," he said. Marcus met his eyes. "No." Zeke stepped closer. "That was the right decision," he said. Marcus let out a breath. "Didn't feel like I had a good one," he replied. Zeke reached into his vest and pulled out a small patch, not the full colors of the club. Something simpler, something deliberate. He placed it in Marcus's hand. "Freeman Motor Works," Zeke said. "Road Family Support." Marcus looked down at it, then back up. "I'm not looking to join anything," he said. Zeke gave a small nod. "And we're not asking you to," he replied. "But you stood your ground when it counted. That matters." Caleb added, "You took a hit for us, whether you meant to or not." Marcus shook his head. "I didn't do it for you." Caleb smiled slightly. "I know," he said. "That's why it counts." The fall of Sheriff Nolan Price did not happen in a single moment. It happened in pieces. Investigations opened. Records were pulled. Money trails surfaced. The connection between Price and the development group became clear. The planted evidence was undeniable. The deputy who placed it talked, hoping to save himself. By the end of the month, Price was suspended. By the end of the next, he was charged. The badge that had once made people step back no longer protected him. And in Red Mesa, people talked. They talked about what had happened, about who had been right, about who had finally said no. A year later, Freeman Motor Works looked different. The sign had been repainted, straight, bright. The garage doors moved smoothly. Inside, the space was organized, busy, alive. 3 lifts were in constant use. Darius ran one side of the shop, confident now, teaching others the same way Marcus had taught him. Elena handled fabrication work, her welds clean and strong. Marcus still worked every day, still got his hands dirty, still checked every job before it left. But now, when he looked around, he saw more than survival. He saw something built. Maya changed too. The chair Marcus had rebuilt did more than stop her pain. It gave her space to heal. She sat straighter, moved more, laughed more. Therapy helped. Time helped. But the biggest change was something harder to measure. She no longer moved like someone waiting for the next moment to hurt. She moved like someone who trusted the world a little more. Every Sunday, she came to the shop. Every Sunday, Marcus had something ready for her. A cold drink, a new story, a small adjustment to make her chair even better. She called him Uncle Mac now. The first time she said it, Marcus pretended not to hear. The second time, he smiled. On the morning of her 11th birthday, the shop was full. Not with customers, with people. Bikes lined the lot, music played low, food sat on folding tables, laughter carried across the desert air. Maya sat near the open bay, her chair now painted a deep blue with silver accents. Caleb stood behind her, one hand resting gently on her shoulder. Marcus stepped out from the back of the shop, wiping his hands on a clean rag. He raised one hand. The noise settled. "Maya," he said, "I know your dad and your friends got you plenty of presents." She grinned. "They did," Marcus nodded. "But I figured you might need something a little different." Darius and Eleanor rolled something forward, covered in a canvas tarp. Maya leaned forward slightly. "What is it?" Marcus smiled. "Go ahead," he said. The tarp came off. Underneath sat a custom-built electric trike. 3 wheels, low to the ground, stable, strong, painted to match her chair. Controls designed for her hands. Seat shaped for her body. Everything built with one goal: freedom. Maya covered her mouth. Is that mine?" she asked. Marcus nodded. If you promise not to outrun your dad, Caleb laughed. That won't be hard, he said. Marcus helped Maya into the seat, adjusted the straps, showed her the controls. Easy on the throttle, he said, and remember where the brake is. She nodded seriously, then she turned the key. The motor hummed to life. Soft, steady. She pressed forward gently. The trike moved. Smooth. Controlled. Safe. She made a slow circle around the lot, then another. Her smile grew with each turn. Caleb watched, his eyes bright. Marcus stepped back, letting the moment belong to her. When she stopped, she looked up at him. "Uncle Mac," she said, her voice full of something he could not quite name. "This is the best thing ever." Marcus nodded. "You deserve it," he said. Zeke stepped forward then, holding a set of keys. "Mac," he said, "we've been thinking." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That usually means trouble." Zeke smiled faintly. "Not this time." He tossed the keys. Marcus caught them. Behind Zeke, a motorcycle sat gleaming in the sun. A classic, restored, clean, not flashy, just right. "Titles in your name," Zeke said. "Figured it was time you rode something that didn't need a prayer to start." Marcus looked at the bike, then at the people around him, then back at the shop. A year ago, he had stood in that same spot, waiting to lose everything. Now, he stood surrounded by people who had chosen to stand with him. Not because they had to, because they wanted to. Marcus swung a leg over the bike, started it. The engine came to life with a deep, steady sound. Maya rolled up beside him on her trike. Caleb took position on her other side. Behind them, the line of motorcycles formed naturally. No orders, no signals, just understanding. They rolled out together onto the old highway. Not fast, not reckless, just steady. The desert stretched out ahead, the road open, the dust rising behind them in a long golden trail. Marcus looked over at Maya. She was laughing, not holding on in fear, not bracing for pain, just riding. For the first time in a long time, Marcus felt something settle inside him. Not relief, not victory, something quieter, something stronger. He had lost almost everything once, and found something better in its place. A man can lose a business, a man can lose money, a man can even lose his footing for a while. But if he holds on to what matters, if he does right when it counts, if he stands when it would be easier to bend, then sometimes, just sometimes, the road brings him back more than he ever expected. And for Marcus Freeman, that road was just beginning.